Hi, all. Kinsey Schofield here, and I'm with one of my favorite authors in the entire world, Valentine Lowe. You wrote Courtiers. This was an incredible book, but you kind of burst on the scene with this incredible investigative piece about...
Did Meghan Markle really threaten Prince Harry into confirming their relationship? And what about the bullying allegations insiders believe are true? Today, we're diving into claims from royal journalist Valentine Lowe. Stick around. You won't believe what we found.
Some secret bullying allegations that were whispered about, but not necessarily known in the mainstream. And I had the pleasure of interviewing you a while ago about this book, but I thought of you recently again because in the book, Meghan Markle is alleged to have threatened Prince Harry. I don't want to be with you unless you confirm our relationship. And Prince Harry goes out of his way to do this with the palace's help. With Jason Knauf, they put together a sternly worded release that has recently been yanked from the website. And I wanted to know what your reaction was. Is this removal significant? Because I thought of you immediately when I saw those headlines.
I must admit, I didn't know it had been taken from the website. Maybe because it's of ancient history now. If he's no longer a working member of the royal family. So what's the kind of relevance of having it up there, I think. But you've always got to watch out for things which can get removed from websites. When King Charles was still Prince of Wales and no one knew what Camilla would be called, the official line from Clarence House was that Camilla would be Princess Consort. The Clarence House statement on their website that she would be known as Princess Consort disappeared one day. And some journalists noticed, and we all rang up Clarence's house and said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, no, nothing to see here. It's all fine. We're just tidying up the website." And we thought, none of us believed them. But we had to print what they were saying because that's what they were saying. And lo and behold, a small number of years later, the Queen says, she'll be known as Queen Consort.
Valentine Lowe, we're 2 minutes in and you're already dropping bombs. I love talking to you. This is I'm already loving this conversation. Now, I really have enjoyed watching, not only reading the book, but watching you tell the story of how you secured this incredible scoop about this bullying investigation. But throughout the process of watching you discuss it, I've really not seen you talk about whether or not there were any hesitations when it came, when you were approached about it, was there any doubt in your mind that these could be authentic? Or was there just so much evidence thrown at you initially that you thought, I'm onto something here and I've really got to pursue it?
The central allegation, I was convinced of the truth of it. I was very familiar with the content of the famous email that Jason Knauf sent to the private secretary, saying that this was going on. And also I spoke to other people who backed up the story, sort of witnesses to the sort of thing which had gone on. And I saw...
Let's start with the biggest bombshell. Journalist Valentine Lowe claims Meghan told Harry she wouldn't stay unless he confirmed their relationship. A prince, forced to act fast or risk losing her. What did he do? With palace help, he issued a statement defending Meghan, but that statement has now vanished from royal websites. Coincidence, or is the palace erasing history?
I saw WhatsApp messages that had happened, which again backed up the same thing. And, I had conversations, not lengthy conversations, but I had conversations with some of the people who were bullied. And it's interesting, they didn't want to have long or detailed conversations because they were still so traumatized by what they'd gone through. But the conversations, were long enough, detailed enough for me to be convinced of the truth of it. And my bosses at the paper at the Times, and also the newspaper's lawyer, we went to great lengths to make sure the story was copper bottom. It was absolutely tight because, we'd seen what had happened with Meghan and the Mail on Sunday when they printed their story, in which they quoted from the letter which Meghan had sent to her father. They got sued, and we all know what happened there. Meghan won. So we wanted to make sure there were going to be no holes in our story that Meghan, obviously very litigious, could exploit. And what was interesting is that before publication, we got these long letters from Meghan's lawyers, threatening all sorts of stuff and saying the story was made up and it was a smear campaign, all sorts of things, and denying detail. And after we published, didn't hear a word from them. Not one word.
Also, I thought it was interesting because it felt like at the time, Meghan's team really tried to paint this as another smear campaign by the palace. But in reality, it really didn't. It reflected quite poorly on the palace, that the palace would allow something like that to actually happen. So I didn't understand Harry and Meghan's team trying to blame it on the palace and Harry specifically.
You're quite right there, Kinsey, quite right. They claimed it was a smear campaign by the palace, but, I know that the people who I was talking to me were not talking with palace permission, and they knew it wouldn't necessarily go down well with the palace. And yes, it did reflect badly on the palace, because what the palace did, was nothing. So when these allegations were raised, sort of 2.5 years before I wrote the story, it sort of went up the chain, and people were they were paralyzed. They didn't know what to do because...
Now let's talk about the serious bullying allegations against Meghan. Former palace employees described a toxic work environment. Journalist Valentine Lowe saw evidence, including WhatsApp messages and emails, backing these claims. Even more shocking, the alleged speak at length. That's not a good sign. So what did the royal family do when these allegations surfaced?
Because, of course, they hadn't encountered this sort of situation before. And a lot of them were, I think, secretly a bit frightened of Meghan. She was also a force to be reckoned with, and they didn't want to tangle with Harry. And so they did nothing. So these people who were victims of the bullying, the alleged bullying, felt no one had spoken up for them.
Yeah, right. And you actually have said that you had little to no regret about releasing this before the Oprah Winfrey interview because, some of the people approached you concerned about the Oprah Winfrey interview, and it was deliberate on their part. They said, before Meghan has the opportunity to internationally brand herself as a victim, we'd like for you to know our story, which I think is incredibly important.
Exactly. But what was hilarious was that in Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary, they got one of their, members of staff to claim rather pompously on camera that, Valentine Lowe has even admitted that this was deliberately released before Oprah. And it wasn't a question of admitting. I'd always been perfectly open about the fact, as you say, the reason why they wanted this out there was to say there's another narrative out there. Meghan had been portraying herself as a victim, and they were saying, well, there are other victims here too. And they knew full well, and I knew full well, that if that story had come out after Oprah, it just no one would have noticed for a start, and also it would have come across as sort of sour grapes. Meghan saying this, well, we're going to say that. It would have a completely different impact. So it was really important to get it out before Oprah. And it was a slight race against time because there was a point at which it was due to come out initially, I think, on Saturday's paper, and I was all G'd up for this, and I was all ready to go. And my editor decided the story wasn't quite ready, and I was concerned. I was a bit, and my sources, some of my sources were very, very upset because they were taking a risk. They were in sort of psychologically a very heightened state. And they were in a bit of a mess when it didn't come out. Anyway, it came out about 3 days later, and in those 3 days, I'd sort of done more work, got more things tightened up. So I think my editor's decision was completely correct, even though it was sort of quite traumatic at the time. So yeah, but we were up against it. So it only came out about whatever it was, 4 days before Oprah. It was very, very tight.
The answer? Pretty much nothing. Staff reportedly felt paralysed, too afraid to challenge Meghan or upset Prince Harry. Some insiders claim Meghan had a powerful influence over royal employees. Why didn't the palace step in? Were they protecting her or avoiding a scandal? Here's where it gets interesting. In Harry's book, Spare, he describes palace employees sobbing at their desks. This aligns with what Valentine Lowe and other sources reported.
Wow, I've never heard that story before. Thanks so much for sharing it with me. Did you feel like Harry inadvertently kind of confirmed some of your revelations in Courtiers and Spare when he talks about the employees sobbing over their desks? I mean, reading between the lines, doesn't it sound a lot like what you've said, that this was a toxic environment? Maybe Prince Harry just doesn't realize,
no, definitely.
where the toxicity is coming from?
I definitely thought that he was confirming that. But it's very funny reading Spare, because there was a lot of interesting revelations there, a lot of stuff we didn't know, but also a lot of stuff from Harry's perspective. And you can look at it, you think, really, that's the way you saw it, but a lot of people saw things in a completely different way. No, I was just going to say that one of the fascinating things was when he complained about the media portrayal of when Meghan went on what the palace calls an away day with the Queen to Cheshire. So it was just Meghan and the late Queen, and it was a big thing. They went up by royal train. I remember I had the slot to sort of, as it were, see them off the royal train when they arrived, and it was a big story. And Harry complained in the book that the coverage had been incredibly negative. And I thought, really? And I actually went to the effort of looking up all the coverage, including in the tabloids that Harry hated so much, and it was all overwhelmingly positive.
Glowing.
It was glowing.
Yeah.
It was all about the Queen and Meghan sharing a joke, and I think the problem is that he hated the media so much that he just got himself in a complete sort of tiz about things, and he's got
a filter. He's got his own filter.
He's got a filter, and he would only see the negative, and he couldn't see or remember or appreciate the positive. And the other thing I think there is, a lot of the time he doesn't necessarily read the papers. He just looks at some of the garbage that appears online, and yeah, there's a lot of garbage online, and yep, some of it is quite often untrue and quite often unpleasant. I think Harry's absolutely right there, but that's kind of all he said. That's all he sees.
Is Harry unknowingly confirming allegations Meghan's team denied? Let me know in the comments. Does this sound like a misunderstanding to you? With Meghan's new business struggles and the revolving door of staff at their foundation, some wonder, has anything really changed?
Because he was kind of obsessed with social media. That's why, of course, he's so anti-social media now, because
trying to change the way we engage on it here in the States, working with the Aspen Institute. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Archwell has purged employees over the last few years, whether it's audio, production, charity. We've seen it's like a revolving door when it comes to Archwell employees. And current reports are saying that American Riviera Orchard is really struggling to put together a team that Harry and Meghan, specifically Meghan, are confident in, with Netflix even suggesting maybe we step in and handle some of the retail aspects, and we'll kind of try to make it all go together with this new show she's producing with Netflix about entertaining and gardening and cooking and all these things. Do you feel like the reason that they go through employees is because their behavior is similar to when you covered this, is there a change in behavior? Are they maturing? Are we seeing this revolving door because things are kind of the same?
I don't know. It's hard for me to speak to that because I don't know what's going on in the States particularly. But I would say that I think Meghan probably find it quite hard. She is who she is. She always thinks she's the smartest person in the room, which it can be a problem. But it was interesting that a few months ago when they did the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf in Germany, it was fascinating seeing Harry because he was back to his old Harry. He was relaxed. He was funny. He was at home. He just we saw a glimpse of the Harry that used to be. But in terms of their staff, well, I would never apply for a job with them. But also, they've got some new PR guy, some guy handling the media in Europe, the UK and the rest of Europe. And I get the impression that he hasn't been sort of trusted with much yet. He hasn't got the sort of top level briefings. That may have changed in recent weeks. Perhaps he's trusted more now. But I think whatever the truth was, they were sort of quite slow to let him off the leash. And I think that speaks to classic sort of Meghan behaviour.
Reports claim Meghan struggles to keep employees long term. Could it be the same issues again? This story isn't over. Not by a long shot. So what do you think? Did Meghan Markle really manipulate Prince Harry into going public? Are these bullying allegations legit? Let's talk in the comments. I always read what you guys have to say. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you don't want to miss what's coming next.